Good morning and welcome to this Now interview, which is coming out on behalf of Now Jakarta magazine, website, and EE platforms, and of course on behalf of MVP, our sustainability program, both of which look at the business world and look at some of the big names in the business world to try and reveal some of the important information behind them. Today, we are very happy to be talking to Scott Hanna from Freeport. And Freeport is a name which everyone loves to bandy about. Freeport Indonesia. Freeport, the biggest mining company. Freeport, the biggest taxpayer. Freeport. There's so many people who think they know about Freeport, but do they really know anything? We're delighted to have with us today Scott Hanna, General Superintendent of Strategic Support Services from PT Freeport Indonesia. Scott is like millions of other people working from home. We won't tell you where his home is, but I think he's made a very good choice where that is. Scott, welcome to our interview this morning.
Thanks a lot, Alistair. A pleasure, and to your point of working from home, apologies for a slightly casual appearance. I've taken to doing COVID cuts, skipping the barbershop to limit risk, and enjoying the more casual attire from my home office. Well,
when you've got a backing screen like I have, you can be anywhere. So equally casual. But it's a pleasure to have you with us. Scott, let's dive in at the deep end. Can you tell us about the overall operations and output of Freeport Indonesia? It's often described as the biggest copper and gold mine in the world. Is that true?
Sure. There's different groups that have different calculation methods. When you say biggest mine, it typically refers to what are called reserves, and that's the identified ore or amount of metal in that ore in the project. So there are different groups that take different approaches. What I can say as a general matter is our Grasberg Minerals District comprises one of the largest deposits of both copper and separately also gold in the world. And within that district, we actually right now have 4 mines operating. So it's actually a mining complex, but it is one of the largest mineral reserves in both copper and gold. We historically were famous for the Grasberg open pit, which started in the early 90s and closed actually just within the past 18 months. We're transitioning to a full underground operations. We won't have any more surface mining. And those operations are ramping up to sort of full production. In the past 2 years, as we closed out the open pit mine and finished, or not progressed rather, development work in the underground, there's been a reduction in our output as we complete that transition. As our underground ramps up to full production, you'll see us resuming our more historical rates, and we have reserves that will take us through 2041, which is the second tenure of our special mining contract with the government of Indonesia. So it's a world-class mine and one of the richest deposits in the world. Whether it's exactly the biggest is slightly a different matter.
Thank you. There's constant discussion about Freeport's contribution to Indonesia, with supporters saying its overall contribution is huge and detractors saying it's not enough. How would you describe it? It's a thorny and difficult subject, but that's the one that everyone gets hot under the collar about.
Sure. Well, I'd say, the broader issue here is essentially tax rates, which are the essential contributions, basis. And I'd say whether it's corporate or personal income tax around the world, including Indonesia, you're always going to have people on both sides of that issue. Some people will say you should lower taxes to boost investment and promote business growth. And you'll have others who say that, whether big businesses or small businesses or wealthy people in particular should pay more taxes to contribute more to the public good through the government. And, that debate happens here just as it does around the world. And what's the right answer? Well, obviously there's no precise definitive number there or contribution level. It's really reflective of what's going on with the economy and a specific country's needs. So, we're not going to resolve that debate. That's a common, policy issue that continually moves. But what I can say is if we do a hypothetical model and we compare what we pay in Indonesia versus other major countries with major mining projects, Indonesians' relative contribution take or participation is among the highest, if not the highest, in the world. What do I mean? If this mine were in Canada or Peru or the United States, we would generally pay less to that respective host country. So, the first point I would make is you could certainly observe that Indonesia's participation is fair, at least from a world benchmarking standard. The second point I'll make is, and this changes based on commodity prices, operational results, but if we look at our forecast based on our price projections and our operating models, we anticipate that by 2041, the government contributions will be 60 billion US dollars. And, that's especially in the wake of the pandemic and all the economic woes that have been created for that. We believe that those contributions are both significant and important. So, how much is enough? That's always going to be a question mark, but certainly I think we are making important and significant contributions to the country.
I think the way you analyze that should help people to understand that it is a question of balance with the host country. The other area that people get excited about is the whole commitment to the welfare of Indonesia and employment. You are very clear that you are committed to the employment and welfare of Indonesians, especially the local Papuans. How big is that commitment? It's easy to put on paper and in reports. How does it work in real life?
Sure. Well, we just spoke about government contributions, so I'll move away from that in terms of contribution to welfare, although obviously those taxes help build schools and hospitals and do lots of important things. Another important thing I think we do is we create employment which puts food on tables. And our employment numbers have varied over recent years as much as in excess of 30,000 and today closer to 25 and 26,000. But 25,000 jobs is significant. And of those jobs, 98% are Indonesians. And of that 98%, 40% of the overall workforce are indigenous Papuans. And that's been a big commitment for us. We've developed training programs, invested many, many millions of dollars to take folks from the local communities, and unfortunately, many of which have had limited educational opportunities, and give them essentially vocational training to where they can come into the workforce, be safe, be successful, advance their career. And that's been a big contributor to our increasing proportion of Papuan employees. But the reality is you can't hire everyone, especially in an industrial environment with heavy equipment. If there are too many people around, it's frankly a safety hazard, and it's also just not a practical business reality to give everyone a job. So we view economic development and community development as being critical. And to that point, since 1996, we've contributed 1% of revenues, not profits, but revenues, to a community development fund to help education, healthcare, and economic development for the local communities. To date, contributions to that fund are in excess of $825 million. And we now have other social investment programs to assist the community that nearly match those 1% contributions. So, it's certainly a question of development in Papua is always a hot topic, but I think we have contributed generously by many rankings around the world. One of the largest corporate foundations in the world, and one of the highest proportions of contributions to the community. So, kind of similar to the tax debate, you'll always have folks who think that there should be more, but I definitely think that those investment programs are significant and have made a difference in the lives of tens of thousands of indigenous Papuans and many more Indonesians throughout the years of our employment.
Well, there is a quite well publicized, not philanthropic, but sustainability program. It's called 111, which says 1% of revenue. And I wasn't aware that you were doing that. So congratulations, it's a significant amount, because that was held up as a really good example in the States.
Yeah, we've had that program in place in 1996, or rather, excuse me, since 1996, and you know, it's amounted to a huge community investment, and made a lot of, you know, I think important development for our local communities, which we view as critical to maintaining our social license. That is a sort of community endorsement of our operations.
The third thorny subject, the third hot topic, of course, is the environment, Scott. And here we face the usual and constant barrage of people looking for problems. Now, of course, around the world at the moment, people are making their name by looking for problems. But as a major mind, there's always concerns about damage to the environment. I mean, it's kind of inevitable if you cut into the Earth's crust that you cause some damage. That is already a start. But what provisions have you made in the environmental and the surrounding communities to make sure that that's minimized? We realize that you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, but you can mine without causing substantial and long-term damage. How is Freeport doing?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is we have environmental programs in place to monitor, mitigate, you know, all of our operational impacts. And as you mentioned, there's just simply inherent impact in the nature of mining. You're moving earth, you're making holes, and you're exposing minerals and other elements at a rapid or more rapid rate than nature would. So, you know, just inherent in the process are impacts. And so what do you do about that? You monitor, you have you know, management systems in place to make sure you don't have issues developing. One of the most common identified issues for mining is what is called acid rock drainage, or damage to the water system through leaching of the exposed minerals. And you need to make sure that there aren't collections of the types of minerals that cause those reactions gathering in your waste areas. And we have tens of thousands of samples gathered and analyzed every year to make sure that's not happening. But I would say of all of our environmental impacts, and you know, look, we consume fuel, so we have emissions. You know, we have other impacts as well, but most of the focus is on what are called tailings. So when you mine ore, you crush the rock to separate whatever it is you're looking for. And in our case, that's copper, gold, and to a lesser extent, silver. And then the remainder of the rock, you put aside as waste, and that's called tailings. And our system, which gets a lot of attention, is that we use a riverine tailings disposal to take the tailings from the highlands where it's milled or crushed and separated down to the lowlands. And this is an unnavigable river. It's essentially devoid of any natural ecosystem. It's too fast flowing for fish to survive in the mountain area. And we have, you know, examined both in its beginning and continually since every other available sort of geotechnical solution. And just because of a number of considerations, nothing else is really as viable. Why is that? And you've seen in Brazil and other places around the world in recent years what are called tailings dam failures. In the case of Brazil, I forget the exact figure, but I believe it was more than 300 lives were lost when the dam failed. So what is a tailings dam? You essentially build a structure where the tailings all go into, and it has walls. Now, the risk you would face, especially in a place like Papua with doing that, is you have seismic events. It's a seismically active area. You have among the highest rainfall in the world. And so you have some liquefaction and other risks. Anyway, our system, rather than having, you know, a fully enclosed structure, It allows it allows the water to flow out the bottom end of the river to minimize the pressure on the levees that contain and minimize impact on communities and surrounding environment. And what's the value in that? It's a controlled process that you can manage safely. You significantly reduce the risk of failure. That is, you know, when these dams let loose, you have a massive amount of material going very quickly in a way that's uncontrollable. So we've had these systems, you know, monitored and audited both internally and externally. We comply with all of our AMDAL and GOI requirements. And of course, the GOI as a regulator is making frequent visits, taking their own samples. And we believe that given the conditions, our current system is the best available option and conducted at world-class standards.
Presumably, you're doing all of the regular sustainability reports for all of your shareholders, stakeholders, and interested NGOs. What about NGO visits, Scott? Do you allow the naysayers to come and have a look and see what you're doing?
Sure. Well, the first answer is we're obviously in a very unique situation with COVID and the pandemic, and the nature of most natural resource projects, including ours, is you have a significant rotational workforce. And so managing COVID in our worksite has been a challenge. And so therefore we've paused any non-essential visits, any non-critical work visits. Why? Because every additional person that's getting off an airplane is a potential reintroduction or extra introduction of COVID into our workforce. And the nature of our work, in closed spaces, tight physical surroundings, it's a constant management challenge to keep COVID at bay. So with that in mind, we really halted all non-essential visits at the present. But if we assume the world gets back to normal, both historically and certainly going forward, we believe that there's tremendous value in having NGOs and others, come kick the tires and see it up close and personal, themselves. So, we all hope that medical science helps us overcome the pandemic and we get life back to normal. And absolutely, it would be our intention to resume those kinds of visits and let folks see for themselves and have a firsthand opportunity to evaluate, what our challenges are and how we're working hard to overcome them.
That's great. So, but let's go back to the future. You've moved from open cast to deep mining, which is presumably much more expensive process, greatly increased operating costs. Will the mine still be as profitable and as great a contributor to Indonesia's economy in the future? Is it still a viable prospect with this underground mine?
Sure. Well, similar to our earlier discussion of GOI contributions, the actual profitability will be fundamentally dependent on two things. One is commodity prices, and the second is our operational success. But the short answer to your question is we have every belief that the underground mine will certainly be profitable. As a general matter, you're right. Underground is a slightly higher cost model, and the reason you're seeing both us and others do more underground mining is kind of all the low-hanging fruit is gone, so to speak. What do I mean? You'd look to do an underground when your deposit is quite deep, because all of the extra material you have to move to access from the surface eventually becomes less economically viable than coming at it, through a tunnel. But what's the key challenge to a tunnel? First of all, you have to put a lot more capital in on the front end to develop the tunnel. Air quality and ventilation is probably one of your biggest challenges for underground mining. And so putting in all that ventilation, the energy cost to run that ventilation. But on the flip side, once you establish it, we predominantly do block cave mining, which you essentially cut out a slice underneath the deposit and let, in a very controlled, engineered manner, the rock sort of fall underneath its own weight. Once that process is initiated, it's actually a very cost efficient and energy efficient method. And if we assume, and oil markets and energy markets, amid the pandemic have been not what I think most people predicted, but if you assume a higher long run energy costs as the world considers carbon and other issues. The underground mining compared to open pit can actually have some cost advantages because you don't need as many trucks. You're not moving as much waste material. In fact, generally none. And certainly also in the case of the Freeport Indonesia operations, which is very uncommon in the mining industry, we're able to take advantage of all the existing infrastructure. So, our mill, which is worth several billions of capital investment, we can use the same mill, the same airport, the same road, the same port. And so the financials, given that we're able to leverage billions of dollars of existing infrastructure, and now that, we've seen strong copper prices and also just frankly a very rich ore body. You can never make guarantees or promises, but we certainly think that it will contribute to all stakeholders, both the government, the community, and our own shareholders in profits for many years to come.
One last question, Scott. You built a sports complex somewhere near your mining complex. Tell us why you've done that. It looks like a really smart, beautiful little complex. Well, maybe not little.
It's absolutely not little. It was meant to be part of the Papuan infrastructure for the PON, the Indonesian National Games, among other things. But it's certainly not small. It's in excess of a $25 million complex with international class facilities, track and field, an arena that can do basketball, badminton, and a number of other sports. It's really mind blowing. Unfortunately, among the many sad developments associated with COVID, the PON games have been postponed, and really the launch of the facility has been postponed. Gatherings right now are just not ideal, but it's when the time, an opportunity finally presents itself, I believe it's going to be a huge contributor to community enjoyment. I mean, there's just no downside to getting a bunch of folks together and having them watch athletes perform. It's one of the blessings of life. And also we believe it's a training facility that can allow Papuan athletes to show their prowess and skills and advance themselves, at least nationally and hopefully at someday internationally on the sports stage, which we think is a great source of pride and a positive thing.
I think that's a really good thing to do. Sport is a much underdeveloped area in Indonesia, as you say, for personal and national pride. And I think it's a great thing to do. We're going to call it a hold there, Scott, taking up too much of your valuable time. I think a lot of the questions people want to know about, you've answered extremely clearly. I know that you're open to questions from the media all the time. So I know that anybody would like to ask any further questions, you and your team will be able to answer them, and I'll be happy to be a conduit for them, the questions to you. But on behalf of Now Jakarta and MVP, I'd like to thank you, Scott Hanna, and Freeport for giving you the time and the clarity of your answers today. Scott, thank you very much indeed. And
thank you. A pleasure. Be well.
Thanks.